Hello, I'm Bowie. Years ago I made this little video. I believe at the time I did it because I just read JC the Hyena's Sonic.exe story, and I wanted to talk about writing a story about a haunted video game. That video was pretty mid. I was still in this sort of middle ground with my voice where I was getting better but not quite what you're hearing now. Editing was subpar and I was still new to scripting myself. Long story short, I'm going to do better now. Today we're going to talk about writing horror stories, and because I'm me, I'm going to mostly stick to stories for video games since that's what most of my examples are going to be anyway, and, mostly talk about games anyway. And oddly enough, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about can be applied to just general writing. So, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Class is about to begin. I can't tell you enough how much I love horror. In my very humble opinion, it is one of the few, if not the only genre that requires pure creativity. And don't get me wrong, fantasy can be pretty damn creative. I mean, there's a reason why I hold Lord of the Rings as the absolute #1 best story of all time. But in horror, you're dealing with an emotion that people do not want to feel. You're dealing with a paradox. Oh man, I'm uncomfortable. I'm scared right now. I don't like feeling this way, and I love it. It doesn't make any logical sense, but it's so much more than that. And horror really relies on some form of limitation. You can have stories that go into entirely new worlds, but you also need to draw it back a bit so those other worlds hit harder. This is the genre where the monsters come from, the things that you hear about at night, the things you hear about on Halloween, the ghosts, the ghouls, the witches, the goblins, the werewolves, the monsters. And you can have these stories, these situations, and you can have someone go through these terrifying things and either emerge victorious or have them meet their demise, depending on the direction you want to take it. You can have that horror be on a more personal and deeper level, more realistic horrors, and really draw out that uncomfortable feeling. Or you could go the science fiction route and maybe have a man twisted into machine and just have these horrifying experiments. Or maybe go more in the psychological route. Man, the sky is the limit. There is so much potential in the genre and so much room for creativity to flow. That's why I just get so disheartened and disappointed whenever I see really talented people just get shot down. Sorry. Let's get into this. So we're gonna start with everything you need to have present in your horror story. And at the start of that list, we have our Holy Trifecta, the things you hear me talk about all the time. You need tension, atmosphere, and immersion. I can't stress enough how important these three things are, and they all work together. In video games, you can obviously build the atmosphere and tension and immersion when you build the environments, like here in Resident Evil 7 with the darkness and the sound design. Or here in Amnesia when you discover the torture chambers and learn what the pipes are for.
These cells are meant to hold prisoners who are under treatment. The people you send for will end up here. Remember that the confinement itself works as a preamble to the torture, and you should pace yourself. Don't take anyone before they are ready.
Understood.
Sounds from the torture chambers are shuttled in through those pipes in the ceiling. Manage your victims well, and let one prisoner's pain instill terror in his cellmate.
Or here in Soma, when you get to fucking Theta. This is the stuff that if you've been watching within the past year, you have heard me talk about before. All of these things have what I said, the atmosphere with the recognizable spaces, but darker so it feels like the shadows are creeping in, that we talked about with Five Nights at Freddy's and Poppy and Resident Evil 7. The tension, what's happening in the moment. We'll stick with Resident Evil 7. It starts when you hear the noise at the door and you're staring down at the darkness from the top of the stairs. And lastly, the immersion, making sure the environment is realistic or believable. It's kind of like that stuff that I talked about in this monster of a video for Garten of Banban, where I talked about how if you think you should be able to do something, then you should probably be allowed to do it. That's in relation to gameplay. Making the game in general feel more real, but you can apply a similar concept to the writing itself. For a world to feel real and believable, that world needs to abide by its own rules. And if you have something happen that fundamentally breaks those established rules, that immersion will crumble. And I have a fucking wonderful example of this. Let's say we have a character that can manipulate metal. We established throughout the entire story that this character can do pretty crazy things with metal, and when it comes down to a final showdown with this thing, instead of having him do something that we've already established him to do, we don't do any of that, or do anything that would make any logical sense, like maybe disassemble the weapons or at least take them away, or establish that bullets probably don't do much good here. Kind of forcing the writer to get creative and think outside the box. No, instead, we'll just have him turn into a giant metal man, and it just so happens that you're able to damage him in this state. Or maybe we have a character that we establish is able to make someone hallucinate so badly they don't know you're there, think their weapons are gone, and see an imaginary fetus monster. And instead of doing literally fucking anything to sort of, prevent him from killing you, you just play hide and seek with him. I'm gonna be so happy when I talk about Resident Evil again. Fucking hell, man. Anyway, I think you get the idea. Just like in those environments that you see in the games, you need your story to be believable, to kind of feel real. But Bowie, these stories are already unrealistic since there's monsters and things like that. Why is realism important? Excellent question. Realism is what keeps the audience grounded. If the situation and setting, environment, everything else feels real, then the abnormal works better. Great example, Final Destination 2. Now everyone knows that the scenarios in Final Destination movies are completely fucking ridiculous. But I am willing to bet money that the first time anyone saw the highway scene in Final Destination 2, they stayed far away from any trucks for a good long time. Because while the idea that death is this invisible entity that has a magical list and it can influence things to happen specifically to kill these people is a little, the idea of a massive wreck on the highway is not. So much so that you hear about them on the news quite a bit. And yeah, what if that chain on the truck suddenly cuts loose? Maybe because the guy didn't do a great job of tying things down. It wouldn't be the first time. That is realistic. That can be scary. That helps ground the audience so the more unrealistic stuff can also work. Tension follows the same logic. Just like the moment where you're standing at the top of the stairs looking down, you still want to draw out the uncomfortable feeling and maintain it and slowly build until it's the right time to release it. The only difference between tension in the gameplay and tension in the story is you're doing it through the storytelling, not necessarily specific events.
What was that?
No, it's just...
Why was it still talking?
It's the same like before.
Catherine, why was he still talking?
That's how it works, you know that.
What do you mean?
You know it's not magic. You were copied. The sleeping Simon in the seat was copied, and now you are here, just like Simon lived on in Toronto.
God damn you, Kath. 2 Simons? There can't be 2 Simons.
What did you think would happen?
That you were gonna take my mind and put it into another body, like a brain transplant.
I'm sorry, it wouldn't work that way.
You realize how messed up this is?
Please, I didn't mean to upset you.
How did you expect me to react to this shit?
Please stop.
You're fucking disgusting. What's gonna happen to him?
He'll sleep for a while, a few days.
And then what? Wake up in this fucking nightmare again? All alone? So cruel.
Well, what do you want me to do with him? Make friends? Let him know that we have to leave him behind when we go into the abyss?
What if What if he didn't need to wake up?
You'd do that?
I don't know. Maybe.
There. I set it up for you. Hit the switch if you want to drain his battery. He'll die within a minute. I'd rather not stay plugged in any longer.
And there's something that can help you build that tension, and that leads into our next thing. What's a pretty common theme that you see with these horror stories, be that games or movies or books? There's always some element of mystery, some question that kind of strings the audience along and keeps them engaged, and depending on what that mystery is, it can help you start building that tension immediately. What happened to all the children? Why does Daniel want to kill Alexander? How did Simon go from the office to here? Why does Miranda want our child? What fucking happened? You could also have a scenario that allows that tension to naturally build as the story progresses.
I think it's extremely important that in order for horror to be effective, you have to establish a relationship with the player. They have to care about the character that they're playing as. When we started doing the game, we were really wanting to do a horror simulator. We wanted to make like the whole gameplay and scene that the player was captured in, all of that should combine into be a horror experience. It shouldn't just be a shooting gallery that's also frightening. It should be the whole point and focus should be on frightening the player. You have to know why you are doing something, and you have to sort of agree to doing that. Say, for example, that you're playing what's supposed to be a horror game, and your character is an army grunt. Yes, sir. Yes, I'm gonna go in here and do that. That's gonna be so different playing that character from playing someone who feels like a normal person who's over their head in dangers and whatnot and can barely handle it. That's the sort of relationship you have to establish. Going into Rebirth, that's gonna be even more important. We want to build on emotions and give more freedom to the player to play around and to frightening themselves. And being able to light a match in the dark and then go around lighting places. See, it's a very simplistic thing, but it adds a lot to the feeling. It also adds a bit of tactility to it, which is something that I think is a big part of Amnesia, in that you have to open doors in an analog fashion, you have to pull levers. It builds immersion for the player and connects them to the character. You have to constantly think about narrative things that keeps the player going. If I say that you have a game where there's monsters that are gonna eat you, and if you get eaten you have to start all over. Okay, shit, I care about not being eaten on a mechanical level. I don't want to do that. But if you have a game that says you are ill and you might get more ill if you get into certain situations, the only reason that you would care is that if you actually care about the character you don't want them to be more ill. You need to have some sort of overarching narrative goals that means that, oh shit, in order to carry these things out, I need to get hold of my current illness. Otherwise, I can see that further down the line, given a bunch of narrative and story bits, I need to stay healthy.
You should play the game, or in this case, I will accept watching a playthrough to see what he's talking about. And if you already know it, don't fucking spoil it. One of the better examples for that mystery thing that I was talking about that I can think of is an old short story that was made into a movie, actually. It's Stephen King's Langoliers. You start with a normal event, the airport, the plane, and then characters fall asleep, and this is where the tension starts to build with our first weird thing. The characters wake up and everyone else is gone. Now, this is weird enough to jumpstart you saying, whoa, what the fuck, okay, what happened? But it's not enough to throw you out, right? It's just weird enough to keep the interest, but not enough to pull you out of the situation. Then we get off the plane and even more stuff is weird. Everything outside the plane is old and flat and bland, and inside the plane everything is normal. And then you meet the Langoliers. It's a It's a pretty good movie and book from what I can remember. Should watch and read it if you have the chance. Another factor to consider is one that I talked about before: the Brennenburg Castle, the Poppy Factory, the Baker Mansion, the Fazbear Pizzeria, the Asylum, the Cult Town. These are all places that you don't want to be in. Example outside of these games, you don't want to be in the Hill House. You don't want to be on the Event Horizon. You don't want to be on the ship in Pandorum. That was a crazy movie. You don't want to be in the house from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and let me tell you, the fucking reaction from the Blair Witch Project, because of the way it was filmed, people thought it was like an actual documentary. And that's a real place, by the way. You're able to go to the place. I don't think the house is still there, but man, people were fucking freaked when that movie came out for several reasons. You have to have a setting that will make someone uncomfortable. If someone is uncomfortable, it's easier to frighten them with something really terrifying. If someone is calm and you have something spooky happen, it's more likely that they just won't react. Now, we talked about realistic and believable stuff, but like I said before, you can have stories that go into other worlds, and you will typically find that these other worlds will often portray the worst of our nightmares. Remember what I said about not wanting to be in these places? Yeah, you really don't want to be in these places. However, you need to be careful. If you're writing a story and this world jumping causes continuity issues, or if this world jumping is acting as a second plot line as opposed to aiding the main plot of the story, and the two don't really connect all that much, then my personal recommendation would be to avoid the world jumping and just stick to one setting. God, this game sucked. Anyway, I think a movie that showed this kind of thing really well was Event Horizon. You didn't go into another world per se, but a device on the Event Horizon, which, by the way, this looks fucking awesome. I guess I'll talk about this. We started the movie with a team being sent to explore a ship that has been missing and recently just showed up. And on the team is a guy very familiar with the ship. Logical scenario, though not realistic, we don't have this technology, but the situation is believable because the characters behave logically. And we're already introduced to mystery. Why did the ship disappear? Where did it go? What happened to the crew? When we get on the ship, what is this device? What does it do? And once it's activated, it starts slow with minor weird things and scenarios, and it gradually escalates. And then there's this video recording that they decrypt or something, and they watch, and I won't spoil anything because I do want you to watch it, but I will warn you that recording goes pretty hard. Like, I legit don't think I can show it on YouTube, but it's so good. Perfect for horror.
We're leaving.
Anyway, back on topic. By switching between your world and the other world, you can capitalize on getting a feeling of safety when you return to your world. There are still horrors and monsters in your world, but at least it's not that world. And that gives you another important element that you want to consider using when writing a horror story. Have breaks from the scares. Have moments where the characters and the audience can breathe in a place that feels safe, knowing that in order to continue to meet the end goal, such as escaping, they have to go back into all the bad stuff. This kind of planning ensures that the audience doesn't get used to the tense environment and the atmosphere, therefore lessening the effects of all the scary stuff. If you want an example of that, look no further than the original Saw movie. You'll notice that there are very few scares in the movie, and that it's mostly just storytelling and build up to one particular moment. I love horror. And yeah, beyond that, there's not really much I can help with. The rest of it relies on you and your ideas and how you write those things out, and those are things that I really can't help with until you start making mistakes, unfortunately. Oh, one thing. So, is there a point where the story stops being scary? Yes, absolutely. There are several factors that contribute to that, but I'll talk about the more common ones that you'll see. One of them is that thing that I was talking about earlier with the worlds and the back and forth and not making much sense. People can pick up on when things don't need to be there or when things don't make sense. And I don't mean like the intentional stuff like H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu. The entire point of that universe is that it is beyond comprehension. I mean when stuff happens and it makes no sense for it to be there. I keep showing Outlast 2, but it's honestly the best example for this. The whole plotline behind transporting to Blake's old school and Father Loudermilch and Jessica and learning Blake's past, it goes nowhere, has no bearing on the main plot, and having that information doesn't do anything to aid the main plot at all. Us learning about what happened at that school doesn't help or affect in any way our ability to find and rescue Lynn from Father Noth or the heretics, and it doesn't determine whether she lives or dies. It doesn't determine whether the cult lives or dies, and it doesn't determine whatever the fuck that ending is. The only thing your actions, in this case finding all of the notes, affect is whether or not Jessica has a mark around her neck at the end of the game. And our interactions with Jessica in this instance isn't real, which lessens the impact of this scene. The only thing the school parts existing does is show what the morphogenic engine can do with these radio towers. But we can already see the effect it has with the cult and the heretics and Lynn. And yet we have so much attention on this particular plotline that it is half of the whole game. When people see that something doesn't need to be there, or that thing being there takes away from the story, that's enough to bring them out of the story, and the story will stop being scary when they see the strings, if you will. Another huge thing that can kill everything that you build up is the "it was just a dream" trope. If you remember the game Little Hope, you might have heard that people were not very thrilled with the ending where it was all in his mind. The reason why people don't like the "it was just a dream" thing is because you realize that because it was a dream, there were no stakes to begin with. Nothing mattered. And if nothing matters, then there's no reason to be scared by anything because nothing will happen. Nothing is happening. It's just a dream. And all the choices you make, all the decisions you make, all the time you spend trying to keep these walking fuck-ups alive means nothing because it's not real. And that realization that nothing matters is a huge reason why stories stop being scary. Like you heard Grip say, people have to care about the characters, people have to care about the world. There needs to be that relationship. You need to care. If you don't care, then why be scared? And then you want to make sure that everything is spaced out evenly. You don't want too many scares happening all at once, but you don't want too much time in between your scares. Like I said, that's all stuff that people like me can't really help with until you make those mistakes. And remember, it's okay to make mistakes. That's how you learn. It doesn't mean that people like me aren't going to talk about it, but it is okay to make mistakes. So if it seems like something that you want to do, get out there and do it. Get your ideas out there. Show me what you got. Alright, that's all I have for you. The last thing I need to say is thank you. All of you who have subscribed to me. Reaching 5K is not something that I thought I would ever see, and you all got me here quicker than I ever thought. I didn't do it. You did. So, thank you. I'll see you later.